Hello and welcome to our program, Where God Weeps, a program where we talk about the situation of the suffering church around the world. Today we're going to be considering the island nation of Papua New Guinea, a young country with a population of about 5 million, out of which 1 out of every 3 Papuans is Catholic. To tell us more about the story of Catholics living in Papua New Guinea, it is my very great privilege to welcome His Excellency Bishop Donald Lippert, the Bishop of the Mendi diocese in Papua New Guinea. Your Excellency, thank you for being with us here today in our program.
Mark, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Your Excellency, you are from the States. You were born in Philadelphia and now are a missionary. Have you always had a missionary heart? Have you always had a desire to go to the missions?
I have to say that I really have. I grew up in a neighborhood that was rather multicultural, and that from the very beginning gave me kind of an awareness of, kind of a global awareness. And as I came into ministry, the Lord led me kind of in that direction of openness to the needs of people in faraway places.
Now you've been working in Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands since 2007. What was your greatest shock when you arrived? What was it that culturally or linguistically perhaps was the greatest challenge for you?
There were many of them, but to tell you the truth, this may surprise you, but my greatest shock was that I felt rather at home when I got there. And I was assuming that since it's so far away, it's so foreign and so different from what I was used to in Pittsburgh, that I felt like I belonged there.
I think perhaps if it's possible to give a picture to those who are with us today on our program, what is it we're talking about when we talk about the daily lives of Papuans. Maybe can you give us a little bit of a picture of day-to-day life? Yes,
it's a very communal life. People live in villages, for the most part, tribal societies, and they're very close to the ground, very close to Mother Earth. So I think me, as a Franciscan, can relate to that. Much of their day would be spent in gardening. It's in the 90th percentile where people survive by subsistence gardening, and so there would be a lot of time spent preparing gardens, working in the gardens, and also the care of some of the livestock, which in our case are pigs. Actually, is what the society kind of depends upon almost as a sign of wealth. But it's a simple lifestyle. It's one that's very close to the earth, and I would say it's very communal, very family based.
Upon your ordination, you were received at the Episcopal ordination. You were received by the offertories with chickens, pineapples, peanuts, bananas. How have the people welcomed you coming from the United States?
Yes, it was the first time that I had ever been handed a live chicken at the offertory, at the offertory of the Mass, and I've had also live pigs and all kinds of things come up at the Mass. It's a sign of I think it's a sign of the generosity of the people, and I also see it as a sign, and I have also felt that the welcome of the bishop, myself as bishop, is a sign of the welcome of the people of the Catholic faith as something that really belongs to them, and not as something that's being imposed of them from outside, from the United States or from Europe or someplace.
The Catholic Church in Papua New Guinea is growing. I mean, I think 1 out of every 3 Papuans is now Catholic. To what would you attribute the growth of the Catholic faith in Papua New Guinea?
I think I think maybe on a couple levels. One is I think the missionary zeal of the first missionaries that came did heroic work. I can speak of our own Capuchins, but it's also true of the SVDs and of the Marists and of the MSCs and many of the other religious communities, has laid a nice foundation for the local church now to begin to grow. And I think that is that is that's where it began, and that was a good start. But then after that, I think the people themselves have caught fire with the message of Jesus and have gone forward with that, and it rings true in their hearts. So it's becoming a real local church.
How would you say, or what stage would you say are you in the process of evangelization? Is it still very much primary evangelization, or is it now, if you will, a deepening of the roots?
It would vary from place to place in the country. Where I am, the first missionaries arrived about 55 years ago.
So very young, in fact.
It's a very young church. It's almost like the Acts of the Apostles there, you know. And then down on the coast it would be a little bit more, maybe 100 years, even 150. But you know, I've come to see I've come to believe that evangelization is like keeping a fire going. So it's not you do it once and then you do it again. It's ongoing. You have to keep adding fuel to the fire, yes, and to keep it alive. So I think we're moving out of specifically moving out of maybe what you would call the first evangelization, but not too far out of that. That's just we're into the first generation, second generation now.
Papua New Guinea is divided into 700 different cultural groups. It's extraordinary to imagine on such a small place, yes, so many different cultural and different linguistic groups as well. What would we understand by tribal culture? If you can just give us a picture.
Yes, in the past it was based on, I think it was more based on geography, and also there was kind of, in the tribal sense, there was a sense that the other was a potential enemy. And so people did not mix, peoples did not mix. And so there are, as you said, over 700 languages in Papua New Guinea. And so people would really identify themselves in terms of these smaller tribal groups, and the other was looked upon as a possible threat or an enemy. And I think the church, being the Catholic Church, is able to bring a different view to folks in Papua New Guinea, and I think it was obvious at my ordination that you mentioned before that we had people from all their different tribal cultures come together for one, to give glory and praise to God at that moment. So I think that's a beautiful thing that the church brings to a tribal society.
Quick question: have you learned the local language where you are, or is the common language English?
The language of instruction is English in the schools, but that's people's third language. There's the 700 tribal languages. Then there's the Pidgin English, which is kind of a common language spoken by most people, and I've learned that language. I'm starting to learn, I have about 10 or 12 languages in my diocese, and I'm trying to learn the basic conversational kinds of words in those languages.
So nine more to go, if you will.
9 more to go.
Let's hope they don't move you to another diocese.
Exactly.
Often missionaries have been accused of stripping away the local culture with the imposition of Christianity. But I don't think that's fair, and I wanted to know what your opinion was, because perhaps the church today is actually the guarantor of culture.
I think that's a good way of actually saying it. I have seen in the experience of some of the sects that come in from the outside who seem to do exactly that, seem to make people stop being who they are. But the Catholic Church, I think, from our theology of incarnation, are able to use the good things about the cultures that in which we minister, and bring those to the full experience of our Catholic faith together. And so, we do not say that people should not come to big celebrations in their traditional garb, for example. And we try to incorporate in the processions. Our people love processions. And so for the entrance procession, for the gospel procession, for the offertory procession, the people come in a very traditional way, which is very meaningful for them.
At the same time, there's a process of discernment, of course. What is healthy for the culture, what is not healthy for the culture. And in this process, I imagine you've encountered the problem of saguma. Can you tell us, what is saguma, and what is the danger to the culture of saguma?
Yeah, sanguma would be something that is certainly a disvalue. It goes back to some of their traditional beliefs in sorcery and witchcraft, maybe is how we would say it in English. Recently we had a very tragic case very close to the cathedral in Mendi, where a woman was accused of sorcery, of sanguma, and was being tortured in public. And so I just very recently wrote a pastoral letter, and it was entitled "Sanguma is a Sin," you know, and I was very I had to pray a lot to make sure that I was not being insensitive. But I think there are times when it is a clear sign of something that is not in keeping with the gospel, that the bishops, the church, should speak out very clearly.
Sanguma is based on fear for the most part. For example, with the rise of AIDS in Papua New Guinea, there have been accusations where if someone falls ill, it must have been as a consequence of this or that person. Yeah. Is this an issue that is on the rise? And again, how do you, I mean, you've written a pastoral letter, but how does the church try and work in this environment?
I think it comes up in two ways. One is kind of just the usual way of dispelling ignorance. People need to find a reason for something, and so if somebody dies, they need to understand that there are other reasons for that. It may have been because of certain behaviors in their life. It may have been because of, you know, a heart attack or things like that. And so some of it, I think, has to do with that understanding. But I think on a deeper spiritual level, I think we have to continue to allow the light of the gospel to dispel this darkness of these beliefs which are really not in keeping with our faith.
You mentioned education. The church, of course, is very strong in this area of education, and the challenge in Papua New Guinea, if I understand correctly, is that the illiteracy rate is up around 50%. What is the church doing in the work in the field of education?
Yes, education is very important, and the government system of education, unfortunately, is still it leaves a lot to be desired. Just in Mendi, we have 55 schools, and that would be true of all the other dioceses. There's a great commitment to education at every level in the country, including one university that is run by the SPD fathers in Madang. But in addition to that, we also have what we call grassroots schools, which try to reach out to people, maybe some people who are a little bit older, and women especially, who have not had the opportunity to go to any kind of formalized school. And so in those grassroots schools, they're really schools teaching literacy actually to the people.
Are the parents happy for the opportunity for education, or is it something which they say, we prefer our traditional methods, our traditional education, our oral culture, for example, and so they might perhaps keep the girls at home? Or how does that work? How does the school integrate itself into the local society?
I think there's not, as you would find maybe in some Asian cultures, there's not that value of education, perhaps, yet, but it is growing. Right now, unfortunately, I think it's growing in kind of more of an instrumental sense, in the sense that I go to school, I can make money, rather than valuing the importance of education for its own sake. But on the other hand, our schools do give us a chance to communicate some of the values of Catholic society also to the children that we are able to, you know, serve in our schools.
You are in a pretty rural area, if I understand correctly. What would be your day-to-day? How do you, just as a simple example, how do you get to reach your parishioners? Do you walk? Do you have a horse? Do you take a jeep? What is your day-to-day?
Yes, getting out to the, we call it the bush. Getting out to the bush is challenging. And I have to say, I really have to praise our priests and sisters who work in the diocese as being very, very courageous and very zealous, because they live in situations where the water that they drink comes off of the roof, the rain. There is no power except for maybe a little generator that they run for a couple hours a day. The roads are, you could barely call them a road, and so it takes a great toll on the cars and vehicles that need to be used. And then there's a great deal of walking. So I'm healthier now than I ever have been.
Keeps you pretty fit.
Yes.
Are you still very much based on missionaries supporting the local church, or are there local vocations? Are the young people considering, yes, maybe I could be a priest, I could be a religious sister?
Yes, vocations are there, they're growing, but again, since we're such a young church, especially in Mendi, we have 11 national diocesan priests, 9 plus 2 deacons, and then in the seminary we have a few, of a total of about 33. So it's about a third local national priests right now, and the rest are still are missionaries from outside the country.
Where would they come, the missionaries principally?
We have a few Capuchins from the United States, but we also have some friars from India. We have the Teresa Fathers also from India. We have some Korean mission societies from Korea, and some Polish priests from various dioceses, and also from the Holy Family. So we have a great United Nations with us, even in the clergy of the diocese.
So you would say, yes, send me more missionaries. That's what you need.
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Indeed. But at the same time, as we're trying to develop the local clergy, we're also trying to work with the local people. In fact, I have another pastoral letter, which in draft form right now, that's going to be speaking about self-reliance. Because if we're really to become a local church in Papua New Guinea and in Mendi, we can't be depending as much as we have in the past on support from outside. Right now it's necessary, we couldn't survive without it. But if in the long term, we have to get the people to move from that kind of missionary situation to a more local church, self-reliant position.
Self-reliance also financially.
Exactly.
How do you manage? I mean, you have a day-to-day existence, a hand-to-mouth existence, if you will, around you. The people are subsistence farmers or fishers. How does the church survive financially? Are you dependent from donations from outside, or is there enough income, let's say, from the local population that you can build the structures that you need?
Yes, right now we're still very heavily dependent on outside help, and I think we do have to move away from that. But as you say, the people are very generous, I have to admit, but they're generous in what they can do, in working. They're generous in contributing food and from their gardens. There is some development in the western part of the diocese now, being brought in by a western gas company. And that will bring some income for some of the people. So it'll be a long process, and the people will do what they can do, and in the meantime we'll have to depend on help from sister churches.
How about the young people? The problem of unemployment, of course, is a big challenge. How do you see the youth and the challenges that are confronting the youth?
You know, I'd have to say that the youth are my biggest worry right now. I look upon them, it's a very young society, many children, many young people, and I feel that they are lost. You know, they're being bombarded now with kind of Western ideas that they see on television or that they hear about, and so that's kind of divorcing them from their local tribal societies, and so they're kind of lost.
They're kind of caught between two worlds, if you will.
That's a good way of putting it.
Are they drawn to the cities for work? I mean, or rather, are they drawn to the cities because they see on the television a different life, and that's a life that they wish to aspire to?
Yes, there's a movement towards Port Moresby, towards the centers, Manhagen, Madang, and it's more it's more an illusion, because life in Port Moresby, for example, of people who is the life of a settlement. They're very dehumanizing, and so yes, they are drawn to these places, but by an illusion. And
then in the end, they despair and they end up in the streets.
Exactly, or they turn to robbery and drugs and alcohol, things like that, like it happens in other places.
Another challenge, of course, that, as we've spoken about, the influence that is coming from abroad is, of course, secularization, materialism. How does the Church try and find a balance here in saying, look, not everything that you're seeing in terms of what you see on television is necessarily a healthy value? How do you work in this area?
Yes, unfortunately, when you have the clash of cultures like that, there's always good things that come in with cultures, like some development and things like that. But there are also some disvalues as well, and so that's a big challenge, and that's part of my worry with the youth. The best thing I think we can do is give good witness of a life, a meaningful lifestyle that is not based upon the accumulation of things.
Just to go a bit deeper into this question, men particularly have lost an understanding of their traditional roles. Principally, they used to be within the tribal clan, a strict hierarchy and a very strong, let's say, role for them to play. Mm-hmm. This has been stripped away as perhaps the government takes over more and more areas of responsibility. What about young men and the impact on fatherhood?
Yes, traditionally men would grow up in what was called a hausmann, which is, you could figure that out, a house for men, and they actually lived there together, and the older men would train the younger men in what it was necessary to how to be a man in their society. Now, as you have said, much of that is breaking down, and so there's a lot of confusion or frustration in the society. And unemployment is still very high. Education, the educational system is not is not what it should be in the society as yet, and so it's a social problem that I think really needs to be reckoned with.
When you were back in the United States, you were very active working in Washington for the rights of the Hispanic immigrants coming to the United States. How much of this experience that you had in Washington can you translate now for the protection of maybe not the rights, but the culture and the people, the dignity of the person in Papua New Guinea?
Yes, the Latino immigrants from El Salvador and Central America were really my first love, I have to say. And I think they were my best teachers also for what I'm doing now. They have taught me to listen, to have patience, and to have hope that difficult situations can change if we allow the light of the gospel to shine on them.
How would you say, or what have you learned from the Papuans themselves? You mentioned this is what you learned from the Hispanic community. Mm-hmm. When you arrived to Papua New Guinea, what is it that you've come away with after your time, or not come away with, mm-hmm. but what is it that you've learned from the Papuan people?
Yes, I have a lot more to learn from them. I've only been there in the diocese, I should say. I've only been a bishop for 7 months, and so I learned many things. But there's a joy, I think, to the Papuan people, and a simplicity of life which rings true with my Franciscan background as well, and just an openness, kind of a simple openness to God and a trust in Him. So I think that's I'm very grateful. I went thinking that I would be doing all kinds of things for them, to the missions, and as you have probably heard before, I feel so blessed by the people that I have the privilege to work with every day.
So, for you, Papua New Guinea is home, and this is where you hope to end your days.
Yes, indeed. Yes. In fact, that's what I tell the people. I said, I'm a Mendi man now, and I'm with you.
Your Excellency, if you were to make an appeal, if you were to say to those who are with us on the program, what is it you need most in your diocese? What would that appeal be?
Well, I would put it, the first thing we all need is prayer, the solidarity and the love and the charity that comes through the prayer. There's a great strength there in prayer, and I'm so thankful for that. Other than that, personnel really would be very helpful, and whether they be priests, whether they be religious, whether they be lay people who would like to come and spend some time as volunteers in the mission, that would be a great help.
What would they expect? They come to you and you'll give them a hut.
We'll give them a place that has a nice roof over their head and 3 meals a day.
Great, great.
And a nice community that will make them feel like they're really making a difference.
Well, I'm coming then.
You're welcome.
Your Excellency, thanks a lot for having been with us today on our program.
Mark, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having been with us today on Where God Weeps. And if you'd like to know more about the situation of Catholics in Papua New Guinea, or perhaps how you might be able to help, I would encourage you to look at the contact information at the end of this program, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.